Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're talking about a threat that can silently, and I mean silently, dismantle your home from the inside out. In a lot of ways, it can cause way more long-term damage than a fire. We're going to demystify the science of water damage and pull back the curtain on the professional playbook for stopping it dead in its tracks.
We've broken this down into 4 parts for you. First, we'll uncover the unseen threat, why some houses are just in a constant battle with water. Then, we'll get into the critical 48-hour window. That's when the race against permanent damage really begins. After that, we'll open up the professional restoration playbook. And finally, we'll help you navigate the aftermath and answer those really practical questions.
So, let's kick things off with the unseen threat. You see, for a lot of people, water damage isn't just some one-time accident. Nope, it's a relentless environmental pressure, constantly pushing against their homes day in and day out.
Let me ask you a quick question. When you think of the absolute biggest disaster that could happen to your home, what comes to mind? For most of us, it's fire, right? Flames, smoke, the whole thing. But the data shows there's a far more common, and in some ways, a much sneakier threat that we should probably be worried about.
That's right, it's water. Whether it's from a sudden pipe burst, a crazy storm, or just a slow, hidden leak you don't even know about, once water gets inside, it starts this quiet little war against the very structure of your home.
To really get this, let's take a look at a place like Winter Park, Florida. It's basically a perfect storm of risk factors. You've got that super humid climate, a high water table, crazy summer storms, and of course, hurricane season. On top of all that, you have an aging pipe infrastructure. See, it's not just one thing, it's how all these factors combine to create this constant pressure of moisture that makes homes there so incredibly vulnerable. And here's the number that really tells the story, 74%. That's the average humidity in Florida. So what does that mean? It means even after you've stopped a leak, the air itself is working against you. It's just loaded with moisture, creating the perfect breeding ground for all the nasty stuff that comes next.
Okay, so you've got the environment already stacked against you. What happens when water actually gets in? Well, that brings us to our second section, the 48-hour race against the clock. This is where a very real scientific countdown begins, and believe me, every single hour counts.
This right here, this is the most critical window you have, 24 to 48 hours. And that's not some random number. It's the scientifically proven time frame before the mold spores, which are, by the way, always just floating around in the air, find a nice damp surface, land, and start to actively grow and form a colony.
Just look at how fast this all escalates. Within the very first hour, water is already wicking up your drywall like a paper towel. Hit 24 hours, and that mold colonization we just talked about, it's happening. By the 48-hour mark, the moisture is literally starting to rot the structural wood in your home. And after 72 hours, you're not just dealing with water damage anymore. The risk of serious biological contamination just skyrockets. It's incredibly fast.
Now, it's also really important to understand that not all water is created equal. In the restoration industry, there are 3 official categories. Category 1 is clean water, from a supply line. Category 2 is gray water. Think of a washing machine overflow. It's got detergents and stuff in it. And then there's Category 3, black water. That's the really nasty stuff from sewage or flooding, and it's seriously contaminated. Which category you're dealing with dictates the entire cleanup process.
So with this ticking clock and these contamination risks, how do the pros actually fight back? Well, that brings us to Section 3, the restoration playbook. And this is about way more than just a few mops and fans. It's a systematic, science-based process for literally taking your home back from water.
The whole professional process really boils down to 3 critical stages. Step 1 is the emergency removal, getting all that standing water you can see out, like right now. Step 2, and this is probably the most crucial part, is the structural drying and monitoring to get rid of all the hidden moisture trapped inside walls and floors. And only after everything is confirmed to be bone dry can that final step, the rebuilding, actually begin.
So how do they get that hidden moisture out? This is where the real science kicks in. Professionals use a field called psychrometrics. It sounds fancy, but it's really just the science of how air and moisture interact. What they do is they essentially turn the entire room into a giant, perfectly controlled dehumidifier. By manipulating the temperature, humidity, and airflow, they create an environment where the air is so thirsty that it literally pulls the trapped water molecules right out of the building materials. It's pretty cool. And you should know, this isn't just guesswork. Any legitimate professional follows a super strict science-based protocol called the IICRC-certified standard. You can think of it as the official rulebook for the industry, making sure every single step, from the first assessment to the final moisture reading, is done right.
So how long does this whole scientific drying process take? Well, on average, you can expect about 3 to 5 days of equipment running non-stop. And you really can't rush it because it just takes that long to safely and completely pull all that moisture from deep inside those materials.
All right, time for our final section, navigating the aftermath. The equipment is gone, the science has done its job, but now we get to all those practical questions that every single homeowner has at this point.
And yeah, let's just get right to the big one. A multi-day, science-driven process with all this high-tech equipment. That sounds really expensive. So who pays for all of this? This is where the distinction your insurance company makes is absolutely critical. Generally, a standard homeowner's policy will cover sudden and accidental stuff, like a pipe that just bursts out of nowhere. What they almost always exclude is gradual damage, from a slow leak you ignored, or flooding that comes from outside your house, which needs a totally separate flood insurance policy. When it comes to insurance, where the water came from is everything.
So if you ever, heaven forbid, find yourself in this situation, this is basically your checklist for hiring a pro. You need 24/7 response because pipes don't burst on a 9-to-5 schedule. Insist on that ICRC certification we talked about. It's also a huge plus if they can work directly with your insurance, if they use modern equipment like thermal cameras, and if they have real local experience.
And that just about wraps up our explainer. When you really boil it all down, the battle against water damage is won or lost on two fronts: speed and science. Understanding that ticking clock, knowing about the scientific process, and knowing what to look for in a pro, that's your absolute best line of defense. So the final question is your home prepared for this unseen threat?